Okay everyone, welcome to this video. So what we're going to do now is chapter 8 lesson B. So we're going to look at the integration of everything we've done so far. Okay, so you'll see that on my C drive under a folder called my_project, I've gathered together various different forms. Some of them we were able to do earlier this semester, some of them not. I think the only one that we were able to do was this registration form, but there are videos and tutorials up that you can use for to go through this. It's in chapter 6 lesson A, the custom forms. So you'll see I have a couple of distinct forms. There's the advisor form, the location form, the registration form, and the student form, and the actual template that we can use to create any other forms. Now, I did not use this template for these forms. These are some of the forms we did in class. So it was before the template. Okay, but you also see that I've got an advisor report that I have done and the student list. So those are the two reports that I've done in the reports videos that I've uploaded for you. Okay, so basically what happens here is I have gathered everything together, but now how do I integrate it? We've been doing one form here, one form here, one form here, one report here, one report here. How do I integrate this together? In other words, how do I have a main form where I can call my other forms from? How do I call reports from a form? What if I want to add security to this integrated system? I'm going to need a login form that allows me to log on to the system. And how do I make the system and the access to the system adapt based on the rights of the user that is logging in? Okay, so we're going to do all of that, probably not in one video. So for now, we're going to focus on our main form, and together with our main form, we're going to do a splash screen. Now you will see I have two pictures. This is just the Northwood logo, which you guys are familiar with, and this is the image that I want to use for my splash screen. Now, what is a splash screen? When you open Forms Builder, or if you've opened Word or PowerPoint, you will see that sometimes you get a little window that sits there and shows you that something is happening. Did you see that little window there? Right? And that is called a splash screen. The reason splash screens exist is that sometimes complex programs can take a little bit longer to load, and the developers of those programs don't want the user to panic and think nothing is happening while it's busy loading in the background. So what they do is they display that little window. You will see if you open Microsoft Word, a little animated window pops up. It says Microsoft Word and it says loading, and it shows you a little animation to let you know that it's loading. So we're going to do something similar. It's going to be a static screen. It's not going to have a fancy animation, unfortunately, but we are going to actually create that screen. So now I have my form and I can connect to it. Now this really is it's not necessarily required of you to log onto the database when you're doing the main form, because the main form is a custom form. There's no tables that you're going to connect the main form to. In other words, if you are going to create the data block, it's going to be custom data blocks. It's not going to be using the wizard and linking to a particular table in the database. Okay, so again, much like your template form and much like that registration form that's in the folder, this is a custom form that we make from scratch. So we want to be able to now actually do something with this custom form. I'm just waiting once again. Okay, here we go. Okay, so now we have our module. Again, it's just an empty module. There's just the window. So here, this one, it's going to be my main form. How if I could spell? Okay, so this is my main win, right? Now, when you're creating a main form that combines a splash screen, you have to create two of everything, right? Because this is going to be a form that contains two blocks, two canvases, and very importantly, two windows. Okay, so what you're going to do is you're going to go to your data blocks, you're going to click plus to create a new data block, and you're going to build it manually. And this is going to be my splash block. So everything about the splash screen is going to be linked to this block, and it's going to sit under the items in the splash block. Okay, then I'm going to create a second block. This one now, this is going to be my main block. Okay, so anything that I do in the main or for the main form itself on the main canvas should be linked under your main block. Okay, so now we need canvases. So I create two canvases once again. The first canvas will be the splash canvas, and the second canvas will be the main canvas. Okay, and then very importantly, we're going to create an additional window. We want our splash screen to display in the splash window, and we want our main form, our main canvas or main form to display in the main window. Now, if you remember in class when we were dealing with our master detail forms, remember we had that navigation issue where when we created the second block, the detail block, it was first in your object navigator. So when you ran your form, the cursor, the little blinking line, would appear in the first text box of the detail rather than the first text box of the master. And to fix that, you had to make sure that the order on the object navigator was right. So in here, the order in your main form, which you've combined with a splash, is extremely important. It should always be splash, main, splash, main, splash, main. So if we look at our object navigator here, do you see the windows, splash, main, the canvas, splash, main. But here we have our main block first and our splash block second. So you need to move the splash canvas so that it's, the splash block, so that it's the highest block. It should be before the main block. Once this is done, you need to check two very important properties. If I right click the canvas, the splash canvas, and I bring up the properties, do you see this under the physical properties of this canvas? Do you see that the splash canvas is currently being displayed by the main window? Do you see that? Make sure that you change that. So your splash canvas should be displayed by your splash window. If I go to the main canvas is being displayed by the main window. So that's okay. We're happy with that. Okay, so now that I've done that, I can bring up my layout editor. Now, remember, there are two canvases. So if I bring up my layout editor, do you see I'm currently working in my splash canvas and I'm creating items in my splash block. But if I switch this, do you see I'm now working on the main canvas? Do you see it's highlighted on my object navigator? And you need to be very careful, Because do you see, even though I'm on my main canvas, if I create something, just as an example, if I create a button, do you see it creates it under the splash block? We don't want that. Anything on the main canvas should be created under the main block. Anything on the splash canvas should be created under the splash block. Very important. It will not work properly if this is not the case. Okay, so make sure that when you are working on your main canvas, you are working in the main block as well. Okay, so here, let's try this. Let's create our main form, because that's actually the easiest and the fastest thing to do. And if you were having an exam this semester, this would essentially be 3 marks. Okay, so let's see. If I look here, I have 1, 2, 3, 4 different forms. Okay, we don't use the template form. We never call the template form. Remember, the template form is there for me to use to create all these other forms. It's not actually something that your end user will interact with. So here, how many buttons would I need? I would need 4 plus 1. I would need 4 buttons, 1 for each of these forms that I want to call, and I would need the 5th button, which would be the exit button. Right. So here I'm going to select my button tool, and this is going to seem strange, but I always like to create and delete buttons until I get to the 10s, because then the buttons will be the same length. You will see if you have a button that's button 9 and then you create button 10 will be slightly longer than button 9, and it's a bit of a pain to try to get them back to the same size. So now all our buttons will be the same size. Okay, so I've created 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 buttons, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to try to space them a little bit more evenly. Right. And then to make sure these buttons are aligned, I can select them and I can align the top, or I can align the middles, or I can align the bottom. So let's say align the bottom. So they're a nice straight line. And this one I will sort of put here in the middle so that it's sort of halfway. Okay. Now, if I have to look here, I have an advisor form, a location form, a registration form, and a student form. So here I want an advisor form button. I want a location form button. I want a registration form button, and I want our this will be the student form button. This last button, very similar to my template, will actually be my exit button. So now I've changed the names of the object navigator. Again, this is very important because we are actually going to refer to these items in code at some point during this process. Okay, so here, if I right click the button and I bring up the property, I can change the labels of these buttons. So this one we'll call the advisor form. This one we'll call the location form. This one we'll call the registration form. This one we'll call the student form. And this one will be the exit, and I'm going to say system. Right. So here we have our buttons. They have some nice labels. We have our buttons here. They also have some nice labels. Technically here we have names, not labels. Very important. So okay, just trying to fix it. Okay, So now, again, we could actually run this. So if I run this, unfortunately, it's still slow. I'm not sure why. Okay. I have my buttons, but obviously if I click on them, nothing happens. We haven't actually coded anything. Okay, so if I go back here, I can start giving my buttons triggers. So obviously we're going to use the when button press trigger. And the built-in that we are going to use for this is actually called call underscore form. Okay, so you'll see here. Okay, to programmatically invoke or call another form, execute the call form built-in procedure. And essentially what you want to do is you want to call form and pass in the location and the name of the form using as a string value. Okay, so what you're going to say is you're going to say call form, and as a string, so you open your string literal, you're going to put the location plus the name of your form dot fmx. Right. Now, remember, every time you create a form and you save it, it saves as an FMB file. If you compile it, it creates the FMX version. If you run it, it creates the FMX version. Every time there's a compilation, it replaces this with a new version of the FMX. So you need to remember, if you create a form and it doesn't compile, you will never be able to use this FMX file. And the FMX file is actually the one that goes live on your service, on your application server. So your end user is actually using the FMX file and not the FMB file. This is like the raw project file. Okay, so here, when I'm coding this, I need to put the location, and this is the location on the hard drive or the network location, and the name .fmx. So here, if I do this, I can just say the location is on my C drive, and the name of the folder is my project. And for the advisor form, if you look here, it's just advisor underscore form dot fmx. Okay, so here, oh my goodness. Okay, let's try it. Just rearranging these windows. Okay, here we're going to say call form. The location is on my C drive in the my project folder, and it's called advisor form.fmx. Okay. If you compile it, do you see it successfully compiles? Let's test this. Let's run this. Right. So I run this and we sit for a while again. Okay, let's test it. If I click on the advisor form button, what is going to happen? Do you see it actually calls the form? And the form you called it from, in this case, the main form, is gone. However, if I actually exit this form, do you see it goes back to the calling form? It goes back to the main form. Okay, once again, if I click on it, there it's working. If I exit, there it goes away. Okay, so that's working. One thing that's very important to remember is, let's say you made a spelling mistake. So if I make a spelling mistake in the actual syntax, in the name of the procedure I'm using, and I try to compile, do you see that it actually tells you there's an error? Okay. Unfortunately, if you make a spelling mistake here and you compile, you see it still successfully compiles, because all it's checking is the syntax of the procedure, and it's checking that yes, you've passed in a string value into this procedure. It does not check the correctness of the string value. So it does not go and check if there is such a form called advisor_firm.fmx. So it successfully compiles. The only time you know that something is wrong is if you actually run your form and you click on it, you start getting an error. So let's just wait and then we'll test that quickly. Okay, so look at what happens when I click on the advisor form button now. Do you see there it says cannot read form C drive my project advisor_firm.fmx. So here you only see the error at runtime. So you need to make sure that you are spelling everything right. Okay, so here you will see that I have used a similar naming convention for absolutely all my forms. So now what I can do is I can copy this one line of code, and now I can go to each of my buttons. So I go to the location form button, I paste that, and now instead of the advisor form, I have my location form. And I go to the registration form, and now instead of the advisor form, I just put in my correctly spelled registration form. And now, instead of my advisor form, I put in my student form. Once again, remember, still not right. Remember to spell it correctly. Okay. And here on the exit system, much like my template, I can simply use the exit form built-in procedure. Okay, let's run it again and then we can wait for a little while. Okay, so now if I click on my advisor form, there it's working again as it was before. If I click on my location form, there's my location form. You can see this one I actually used a template to create. So now, because it needs the primary key field, if I say exit and I don't save, you see it goes back. My registration form, you'll see this registration form can actually display the time, the date that it currently is. My student form, and there's my student form. It's got my alert with the button. That is in chapter 6 lesson B. And there's a video for that if you haven't seen it yet. And my LOV, right? And if I click exit, there it exits the system and I can close my browser. Okay. So what do I actually have here, guys? I have actually a fully functional main form. I can call another form from it. If I exit that form, I go back to my main form. Okay. All we can really do at the moment is make it look a little bit prettier. Right. So let's try to just slap in the Northwoods logo. Companies are very funny about that. They like to have branding on their system. It gives them a sense of ownership. Okay, and we can maybe make the canvas just a little bit smaller because there's a lot of unused negative space. Okay, and then we make the window itself a little bit smaller. Okay, I think that looks good. And that's it. We can save this. And here, I'm going to just save it here as my main. Oh, no. This is another example that actually had the main form already. So let's go to my project, and this is my main form, right? You'll see now under the C drive, I have my project, and there is the main form. If I have to compile this form, you can just ignore this error that's being generated. That's just because our block is empty. It won't be for much longer. Okay, so there's my main form.fmx. So it still compiles. It's not a critical error. So now I've done my main form. It's as easy as that. So now this is where it starts getting interesting. I need to do my actual splash portion of this main form. So to do that, what I need to do is I first need to switch to my canvas. Do you see I've switched to the splash canvas, and do you see this is empty? It's a completely different canvas. Look at what happens if I go back to my main canvas. There we go. It's completely different. Okay, so I go back to my splash canvas, and once again, make sure that you're working in the right block. Now, for the splash canvas, we're going to do things a little bit differently. Up until now, like on the main canvas, I've been importing an image. And when I import an image, do you see it adds the image here? So let me go back to the main canvas. If I click on this image, do you see under the canvas, it's an image. And this, again, like I mentioned in class, is what we call a static image or a boilerplate image. It's not really there as a functional item. So if the user clicks on it, nothing happens. It's basically there for aesthetic reasons. It's to make the form look nicer or to give the form a sense of ownership through branding. Right. Now for our splash canvas, we're going to do something a little different. If you remember, in my project folder, I have the nwsplash.tif. That is an old image file type that's not really used much anymore. Okay, but let's go with it. I want this to appear here on my splash canvas. But let's make it a little bit more interesting. I don't want it to be a static image. I want it to dynamically read an image from the hard drive. How do I do that? to do that, the first thing you're going to do is you're going to create something called an image item. So I take the image item on the image item tool, I select it, and then I click and drag the size of the image that I want. So there it is. And do you see this time it's blank, there's nothing in there, but do you see it appears under a block? It's not a picture that appears under your canvas, okay? But it's empty, there's nothing there. Now it's just called itself image 16. I'm gonna call it my splash image. Okay, splash underscore image. Okay. And remember, the whole point of the splash screen is to tell your user that, you know what, the system is loading in the background, just give it a bit of time. So here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add some text just here on the bottom, and this is just boilerplate text. So you'll see it appears on the splash canvas as text. So here I'm going to say, please wait while the system loads. Okay, do you see there it appears as just some text, right? And I'm going to make this a little bit bigger. So let's make it 20. That looks fine. Okay. Okay, so now the question is, if I run this, let's see what happens. Let's just see what displays on this canvas if I run it. Okay, so do you see that the splash window is displaying now? And do you see there's the image item, but there's nothing in it? And now we have just the message that says, please wait while the system loads. Okay, I close this. Now, how do I actually read the picture from the hard drive to this form, into this image item that I've created? To do that, at form level, you're going to create a trigger. And this trigger is very powerful, so you need to be careful with it. But it's very important because we're going to use it a lot. So if I right-click that trigger, at the triggers at form level on the object navigator, and I select smart triggers, you're going to use the pre-form trigger. And we use this trigger a lot. Okay. So now on this preform trigger, we are going to use a new built-in. So here, the built-in is called read underscore image underscore file. It reads an image of the given file type from the given file and displays it in the Oracle Forms image item. Okay, and you will see there's a couple of ways you can do it. The one we are going to use is the second one. It's a procedure, so it's not a function. Read image file, and then I need to put the file's name as a varchar2. I need to put the file's type as a varchar2, and I need to put the item name as a varchar2. So this is the name and the location of the image I want to use. This is the type, so the extension of the image. And this is the item on the object navigator that I want to put this image from the hard drive into. And how do I know this file type? Because this I have, the file name. the item name I have on my object navigator, but how do I know the file type? If you just scroll down here, the valid file types is bitmap, cals, GIF, JF, IF, JPEG, PICT, RAS. There's TIFF, but you'll see it's TIFF or TPIC. Right. The file type is optional though. So you don't need to put it in. It will try to guess it if it needs to. So here I say read image file. I need to give the name of the image file and the location of the image file. So here, and remember, as a varchar 2. So like I did my call form. So I open my string literal and I say, on my C drive in the My Project folder, I have the nwsplash.tif. So do you see the actual physical path of the file with the name and the extension? I'm going to put in the file type just for completeness sake in case you want to try it, but remember it's optional. So it's a TIFF file type, and remember it says please put it in as a varchar 2. And now I need to put the name of the item that I want to insert this picture into. So the name of the item, if you look on the object navigator, is splash_image. And remember, they said as a varchar 2. But always remember, when you are referring to something in your object navigator that is in a block of some kind, you need to always specify the block as well. So the splash image is underneath or is part of the splash block. So here it's the splash block dot splash image, because remember I could have another item under main block also called splash image. So now if I just put splash image there, how does it know which of those image items I want to use? It'll only know if I specify the block first. Very important. And then I can close that and I can put my semicolon. If I compile it, it successfully compiles. Remember though, what am I doing? I'm passing in string values into this procedure. So it checks the correctness of the syntax and the amount of arguments you're passing into the procedure. But remember, it does not check the correctness of what you've typed in your strings. Okay, so if you make a spelling mistake with the name of the picture, when you run it, it's just going to show a blank picture there. And it's going to give you an error that says it cannot find the picture. Okay, so now if I run this form, let's see what happens. Oh, okay, do you see it's actually reading the picture from the hard drive into this item using that code? Okay, you might be asking yourself, okay, but what's the point? What's the point of doing this when it's just easier to import the image like we've been doing up till now? There's advantages and there's disadvantages to this. So by doing this, you're creating additional network load in a sense, because it has to read the image every time from a network drive or something like that. But you're keeping your forms smaller, which actually reduces network load. If you have to import your images all the time and they become static images, and they're big images, it's going to increase the actual size of your form because they're static, they're built into the form. The one advantage here as well is, let's say that Northwood's has to update their logo to something new. Because they're static images, you would have to open each of these FMB files, replace the logo, recompile the file, and take the new compiled form back to your application server. Whereas if these all had a referenced image item that reads a picture off the hard drive, you just replace that one picture on the hard drive and all your forms that read it will have the new logo. But that increases your network load. So pros and cons, it depends on your situation for the business that you're operating in. Okay, now let's just quickly compare this picture with the one I have on the hard drive. Let's see. Do you see that this picture is actually cropping? Do you see part of the picture is missing? How do I fix that? If I right click and bring up the properties of the image item, do you see here the sizing style is set to crop, and crop says just cut off if the picture is too big. Now we can set it to adjust, and it will actually try to fit the picture in. It won't make it perfect because it cannot scale. Remember, there's in pictures there's a setting called scale. So if the picture is too big or it's going to be too narrow for this, it will leave white borders around it because it tries to preserve the aspect ratio when it adjusts it to the image item. Now, I would show you that, but you know what it's like when I run a form. For some reason, it's taking very long. So you will see it the next time I run it. So now we've done this. It's reading the image correctly from the hard drive. It's loading it onto my form. So now, how do I get the splash part to work? I mean, remember, what does a splash screen do? It's there for a few seconds and then it goes away. Unfortunately, that's not what's happening now. If I run this form, the splash screen is going to sit there and it's never going to actually display this, which is what the user needs to be able to use the system. So what do I do now? The first thing you want to do is you want to create a timer. How do I create a timer? First of all, we're going to be working in the preform trigger. And now we are actually going to use another one, another built-in. This one is shockingly called create_timer. So here, create a new timer with the given name. So you give the timer a name. You can indicate the interval and whether the timer should repeat upon expiration or execute once only. When the timer expires, Oracle Form fires the when timer expire trigger. And I want you to look through there. Very important. Do you see that this one is a function, right? The function is create_timer. You give the timer a name as a varchar2. You give the milliseconds as a number, and you give the iterate as a number. Let's look at what does iterate mean. Iterate is whether it should repeat or not repeat, right? By default, if you don't pass in the value, it automatically repeats the timer. For a splash screen, we actually wanted to no repeat, so we're going to have to pass in the value. We only want it to run once when the form runs, right? We don't want it to loop the whole time. So, and the most important one I was talking about, do you see it's a function? And do you see, because it's a function, it returns something. And the data type it returns is a form-specific data type called timer. So a function, remember, returns something to what? To a variable. So because I have a variable, because I need a variable, I need to have a declare section. And in this declare section, I'm going to declare a variable called vTimer. And the data type of this is the form's data type, timer. And because I have a declare, I now need to have the begin so that the compiler knows when the declare finishes and the begin starts. Okay, so now here I can say my v timer must be equal to whatever is returned by the function create timer. The first value you have to give is the name as a varchar2. And this is a name that you pick. So for example, I'm going to call this timer my splash timer, right? Then you need to give the milliseconds you want the timer to last. Now there are 1000 milliseconds in a second. So if we want our timer to last 5 seconds, it's 5000 milliseconds, right? And then I need to say whether it's repeat or not repeat. If I leave this value out, what does it do? It defaults to repeat. But the splash timer should only run once when the form opens. So here I'm going to say no repeat. Now don't get confused. I know it's technically looks like a string, but remember it said that the iterate must be entered as if it was a number. In other words, even though it's letters, I don't put my string values. I only put those when I'm dealing with a varchar. And now that I'm done, I can say end. If I compile and I run this form, let's see what happens. Okay, so it's there. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Absolutely nothing happens. Okay, so before I explain why nothing is happening, I want you to look. Do you see now it's adjusting the picture? But because it's keeping the aspect ratio, this picture is a little off again, right? So let's just try to make it a little bit smaller this side. A little bit smaller this side, maybe it'll look a little bit better. Okay, so now my question is, the timer didn't give us any errors, so why isn't it working? If we go back to our help file, when the timer expires, Oracle Forms fires the when timer expire trigger. We've not done this part. We haven't told Forms what to do when that timer expires. So where do I go? So here I go to Form Level Triggers. I go to Smart Triggers. Do we have a when timer expired? No, we don't. So I can select Other. And so I say when, I put in the W, timer, I put in the T. There's multiple T, so I put I. Look there, when timer expired. I click OK. Do you see I now have a when timer expired? And I can enter new code here. Now here, we are going to use, again, some new tools, or new built-ins, sorry. So the tool we want to use is actually called Show Window. What does it do? Displays the indicated window, and we can say show. There's multiple ways you can do it, but the one we're going to use is Show Window, and we give the window's name as a varchar2. It's a procedure, so it doesn't need to return anything. And the other one that we're going to do is hide window. Exactly the same. So the procedure is hide window. We give the window's name as a varchar2. Right. Now, what's very important is you cannot hide a window if the focus is still in that window. So here we have the focus still in this. When you run this, the focus is still in this window because of this image item. So we need to move the focus to an item on the object, on the main canvas, which is actually linked to another window, the window we want to show. Okay, so we pick a button here to link it to. And if you remember, when we were dealing with LOVs and we created the LOV button, what we did is we moved the form focus or the cursor from one text box to another text box that had an LOV assigned to it. Right. And how did we do that? If you remember, we used the go item. So let's see. So let's try it now. The first one, and the order of that you do this is very important. So you want to say show window, and you pass in the window's name as a varchar 2. So when I have the splash screen window open, which one and the timer expires, what do I want to do? I want to show the main window, because the main window is the window that has the main canvas, which has all my buttons associated with it. What do I want to do after that? I want to hide the splash window, because I don't need the splash screen to be displaying all the time. Okay, that's why in the beginning I told you it's so important to go to your canvas and check the properties and make sure that each canvas is assigned to the correct windows. Okay, if both canvases are being displayed in one window, this is not going to work. And now I want to go item, so I want to move my focus out of the splash window to one of the buttons on my main block. So here I'm going to say move the focus to the main block, and let's say to the exit button. Okay. And if I compile this, it successfully compiles. Let's test it. By the time this thing displays, I might be able to retire. Well, let me give a lead up. When it's displaying, or when it displays, I'll count down the timer already. One, 2, 3, 4, 5. There we go. Do you see that? It's hidden the splash window. The main window is in focus now. And do you see the exit button is being highlighted, because that's where we move the focus to. And that's it, guys. That's how you do a main form with a splash window built into it. Okay, so in the next lesson, what we're going to do is we're actually going to try creating a login form. So your login form will display before your main form, and it will require your user to log in. Okay, so I'll see you on the next video.